Welcome to the HERHealth podcast, transforming health for women and girls at risk, where we empower women and girls to take charge of their health and well-being. Join us as we shine a spotlight on issues affecting women and girls' health and explore ways to create positive change. Get ready to be inspired and empowered as we discuss health, advocacy, and empowerment for women and girls at risk. Please be advised that this podcast may cover sensitive topics such as gendered violence. We understand that these discussions can be difficult to listen to. If you feel uncomfortable or need support, we encourage you to prioritize your well-being. Consider exploring our other podcasts if these topics are triggering for you. Resources can be found in the description.
Welcome to the HERHealth podcast, where we explore the issues that shape the health and well-being of women, girls, and gender diverse people. In this episode, we're joined by Sura and Dr. Sarah Woods from Child Development Institute, or CDI, to talk about Mothers in Mind, a trauma-informed therapeutic program designed to support mothers who've experienced relational trauma, such as childhood abuse, neglect, or intimate partner violence. And through early intervention, a child-centered approach, Mothers in Mind help mothers reconnect with their children or strengthen their caregiving confidence and practice self-compassion. And today we'll explore how the program works, what impact it's having, and why this kind of support is so essential for families healing from trauma. Thank you so much for joining me today. I truly appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And to begin, can you kind of tell us what inspired the creation of Mothers in Mind and what gap in services it was kind of designed to fill?
Sure, I can start with that. So Mothers in Mind was developed kind of out of a need that we saw in our gender-based violence services at CDI. We were running a program for children aged 4 to 18 who had experienced intimate partner violence in their home. And those older children were attending with their moms to kind of focus on reconnecting after trauma, processing kind of thoughts and feelings about what happened at home. And while we were running this program, children who were siblings of the older kids, little ones, so infants and toddlers, were in childcare. So they were in our building, attending our agency, but they were not receiving any service. They were in childcare with some fantastic childcare staff, but there was no attention kind of to that impact of trauma. So we started thinking about, okay, what can we do? At the time, there was more and more research coming out about the importance of the early years. There was more and more talk about how even though infants and toddlers couldn't tell you about what happened in their home, they're still being significantly impacted. But we knew that that program would have to look different. So little ones would need to be in relationship with their moms the entire time in order to sort of benefit and support them. So that was the development of MIM. We started that back in 2005, around there, and then over time have developed a few different models of MIM.
Yeah, so MIM's actually celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, which is really exciting. And just speaking a little bit to the gap in services, as Lisa mentioned there, the impact of interpersonal violence in infants and toddlers, as Lisa mentioned, it's often overlooked, but because of their dependence on caregivers, their young age, their closeness to caregivers, they're often very much impacted. And because of the very vulnerable phase of brain development they're in, we know the 0 to 3 brain development phase is critical. There's a lot of growing and development that happens there. We really need to pay special attention to these young babies and toddlers.
Thank you so much for diving in, you two. Yeah, just learning how much impact these children have by the environment that surrounds them. So that seeing that gap in service, and not saying that childcare is not important, but finding a way that also incorporates things that might be happening in the home is so important. So thank you so much for diving into that. And the program is described as both trauma-informed and therapeutic. So I'm just curious, what does that look like in practice when working with mothers and their young children?
So I always talk about Mothers in Mind. The way to think about Mothers in Mind is if you were to peek through a window and to see Mothers in Mind but not hear the discussions, it would look like any other mother-child play group. So we've got moms and kids on the floor. There are circle times, lots of songs and stories. and lots of conversations between the moms and with the facilitators. And there are a few things that make it different, though. All of the moms know that every mother in that program has had something happen hurtful in a relationship, whether as a child or as an adult. And that shifts things and it opens up opportunity for conversations. Many moms talk about going to other really great parenting groups, but it's hard to talk about the impact of that hurtful experience if you're not sure if other people in the room have had hurtful experiences. And we often make assumptions that nobody else but me has had that experience. So MIM is a sort of a special place where we can open up that conversation where we're not going to talk about the details of the trauma. That is not what MIM is about, but we're going to explore that impact. So an example I always give is the idea of tantrums and toddlers. So tantrums are a developmental appropriate, expected stage of development. It's how kids manage when they're overwhelmed with their feelings. And they're challenging. They're really difficult. We've got yelling, we've got screaming, sometimes we've got kicking, sometimes we have hitting. Most parents find them hard. But in MIM, we have the opportunity to talk about what's that like if you've had hurtful experiences? What does that yelling and kicking and screaming feel like to you when you've had hurtful experiences? Does it remind you of a hurtful experience that happened to you? Does your child, in fact, remind you of the person who hurt you? And how do you parent in that moment when you're afraid of your child? So these are the conversations that happen in MIM, these little conversations that can just sort of shift perspective and really help moms who have maybe internalized their challenges with their parenting, possibly due to abusive partners who are belittling their parenting, who are putting their parenting down. It's this opportunity to kind of separate that out and look at that impact and have everyone else in the room get it, that you feel kind of open and you can share those things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so exciting to hear that the other people have may experience the same thing as you have in many different facets, including things like intimate partner violence or any type of hurtful experiences. And I really loved in your webinar, you dove into the window of tolerance that mothers have that had hurtful experiences. They might react differently to like like a child's tantrum or whatnot. They might be feel a little bit more anger come up or things like that. So I really appreciate you diving into that. And I suggest everyone to learn more about that as well as by watching the webinar. And I'm really curious how Mothers in Mind help mothers strengthen trust and connection with their children while also nurturing their own self-compassion and healing.
Yeah, great question. So there's two sort of key pieces that Mothers in Mind focuses on. There's the maternal well-being, and then there's maternal sensitivity and responsiveness. So the maternal well-being is, really looking at mom and how are they doing? How can we enhance their self-care strategies? How can we enhance their self-compassion? So really strengthening those pieces, providing stress management skills. We already talked a lot about that connection to others with similar experiences. There's something really validating about hearing that others are going through the same thing that you are, and that connection, that sort of knowing that you're not alone, you're not isolated. We know that mother's well-being is critical to future increased resilience and better long-term life outcomes. The second piece is that maternal sensitivity and responsiveness. So looking at how can we strengthen feelings of parenting confidence. So Lisa will often give examples of in those play-based groups, the facilitators are catching moms being really fantastic parents, identifying what are those moments of connection between mother and child and calling it out for the mom. And that can help enhance their confidence. When we know moms are feeling in control, they're practicing their self-regulation, they're able to support their child and babies in co-regulation, because we know babies and young toddlers, as we just talked about, tantrums, but they're able to be a supportive person through those difficult moments. And then finally, we're looking at, again, the maternal sensitivity piece when we're we're feeling in control, we're more confident, we're using the stress management skills, etc. We're better able to respond to our child's needs. You're expressing emotional warmth, providing the support that the children need. And that really all works towards strengthening that parent-child bond.
Thank you so much for diving into that. It's really, yeah, it's super odd, but Miss Rachel has talked about serve and return interactions in the last week. So it's really awesome to see how important it is and it coming into the media about interacting with child, and your child has its own self-regulation and like talking back and forth, kind of like that tennis match when you're serving, returning with your child. So it's really glad to hear that, as well as I'm very focused on in my volunteer work, the agency of mothers, and making sure when trauma-informed care, we talk about agency of mothers and that they are doing a good job. We just need to start building their confidence a little more. And for the most part, mothers are doing a great job. And so it's really glad to hear that you're also doing that well-being, but also building that confidence in mothers in these situations. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm going to go back to you, Lisa. So, as a co-creator and a clinical lead, what are some of the core principles or activities that guide each session of the program?
Yeah, I think Sarah had mentioned moments of connection. So we have these two areas that we really focus on: moments of connection and moments of disconnection. These happen in all mother-child relationships. Moments that are working really well, and moments that are harder. So for moments of connection, you just talked about serve and return interactions. We are really focused. Facilitators are focused on trying to find those moments, that lovely little back and forth, right? It might be very subtle. It might be a little smile. A little one smiles to mom, and mom gives a little smile to child. It might be quite large and beautiful to see a toddler coming over with a cup of tea and a mom taking the sip and responding. So we are looking for those little moments. It is a really big focus for the first number of weeks of Mothers in Mind. We're looking for what's working well, and we're finding ways to reflect that back to mom. For some moms, they may have not had anyone else identify and talk about the things that are working well, especially if they've been involved with systems that are focused on what's not working well. So we spend a lot of time there. And it can be like the very, very easy, oh, he really seems to love it when you rub his back, or gosh, I don't know if you saw, Susie during circle time, but she lit up when she heard you sing. It's the little tiny things like that. And we spend a lot of time there for moms to it's easier to kind of shift and build on your parenting when you know what's working. It's easier to do more of what's working than to totally shift and change something. So we spend time there. And then we really focus on building relationships with moms. So facilitators are there. They're there to connect outside of group, inside of group, to build that kind of safety and security. And then when it makes sense, and if moms are ready and there are harder parts to parenting, those moments of disconnection, those feelings, those times when moms and kids maybe withdraw from each other, or a child cues a mom and a mom's not sure what to do or is frustrated, kind of in a moment, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to help. We spend time there in the group in that moment supporting moms. And it's often kind of this idea of, nothing works in a linear fashion, but you're kind of supporting mom over time and thinking about what's happening to you in this moment. What's happening? What thoughts are coming up? What are you worried about? Do you have any responses in your body? Do you notice that you're starting to shut down? Do you notice that you're, starting to feel too much? And kind of trying to help her identify that. And then over time, you're helping her think about her child. What do you think is happening for your child in that moment? What do you think they need from you? What's worked in the past? What hasn't worked? What would you like to try? What would be the smallest little step that kind of can inch you towards that? Do you want support from the facilitator? Do you want to do it alone? All of those things, always being invited into that relationship and not kind of stepping into the mother-child relationship. Um, and then where appropriate, finding ways to support moms in reconnecting or repairing if they've had a hard moment. How do we bring mom and child back together to help their nervous systems come down? And I think an example that from a group that always stands out in my mind. We had a mom who was attending. She had two children under the age of 4, so they were both attending group. She had a 3-year-old son and I think a 1-and-a-bit-year-old daughter. And during group, the son was having a very hard time sharing toys with his infant sister. I think he was holding it over her head, that kind of thing. Very typical toddler behavior. Toddlers are not great sharers. But for this mom, that moment had a different meaning. So when she saw her son holding that toy, she was getting quite activated in that moment. And the facilitator had a really good relationship with this mom and was able to go over and kind of support her in thinking about kind of what's going on for me, what is this about, what does my kid need, kind of all of those different things. And at the end of that kind of moment, after their work together, the mom turned to her son and said, I know you're only 3 and you haven't learned how to share yet. She was able to see that moment differently when kind of thinking about what was going on for her. Is she was very clear that she did not want her son to become abusive like his father. And she interpreted that moment, that day-to-day moment, as a sign that maybe he was moving towards. And so that was where the activation was coming from. And providing opportunity to kind of process that a little bit and see it different and kind of bring in a drop of information about toddlers are not great at this, where they're working on it, but they're not great, really helped her to see things differently. Those are the little moments that happen.
Wow. Thank you for the anecdote. I think that's really good. It really helps me understand why, in those situations, why it's really important to kind of reframe thinking in those moments, and why the work of the facilitators are so important, as well as having, I know you mentioned there's only 6 moms max per group for Mothers in Mind, and just, yeah, having that one-on-one facilitator time, as well as working as a group to share its connections and things like that to learn forward. So thank you so much, Lisa, for diving into that. I truly appreciate
Pleasure.
it. And then kind of moving into Sarah, from more of a research and evaluation perspective, what have you learned about the impact or outcomes of the program for mothers and their young children?
Yeah, so it's really exciting. We're seeing some fantastic findings that moms and children are experiencing real change. Based on the maternal well-being and self-compassion, self-care, and the responsivity pieces, we're assessing those pieces specifically. And so we see significant improvements in mom's compassion for the self and child. Lisa just gave a great example of that. We're seeing improvements in mom's self-regulation, so their ability to calm their emotions, which then allows them to connect and positively interact with the child. In particular, if your child is, dysregulated, having a temper tantrum, et cetera, it's really important that mom is able to regulate, particularly with this age group, babies and young toddlers. They don't have those skills yet, so they learn those skills by co-regulation. We're also seeing moms improve their self-confidence. So we spoke a little bit about that already. With higher rates of empathy, they're more self-accepting, they're less judgmental about themselves, about their children, and that helps them become more confident, more effective as a parent, feel more in control of a parent, not more in control of their child, but just more in control of the parenting strategies and skills that they're using. And all of these things we know from research allows moms to be present, they're mindful, and they're compassionate, which then in turn, as I mentioned, we know from research, strengthens that attachment with the child. We also know that, that's sort of self-report back from moms, which is fantastic. But in the child protection model that we speak a little bit about in the webinar, we also hear really great improvements from the child protection workers. So if in that particular model, the family does have child protection involvement, it's a MIM facilitator along with a child protection worker who are helping to support this program. And those child protection workers are noting that mom and child safety is improving, and that they're making progress towards achieving those child protection service plans and goals. So that might be moving closer to closing out the case file, reducing involvement, or if they've lost custody of that child, then a reunification plan is in place and achieved. So we're seeing some really, really nice findings based on those really key pieces that we know is impactful, and will help those moms with their resilience, self-confidence, parenting skills, which then in turn supports those babies and infants to be set up for positive lifelong outcomes as well.
All wonderful things to hear. And I'm really glad in the webinar you discussed both the numbers, we're seeing improvements, that's wonderful, but also that the mothers themselves are actually feeling good about the program. They're feeling confident about the program. I wrote down something about this feeling more connected as well, extremely satisfied with the program. So the numbers are important, but I always love to hear those interviews with individuals involved in the program. And I'm really glad to hear that it's going really well for everyone involved.
Yeah, some of those quotes are really fantastic. They talk about that connection being with other moms who've had similar experiences. Just quickly, one quote, before this group, I was an overstimulated hot mess. So that really talks to that dysregulation piece, lack of confidence, not really sure how to respond to their child, and really how the program has helped strengthen that confidence, enhance those skills, been able to identify what are those strengths that mom has and being able to build on those pieces.
Absolutely. And kind of moving forward, we know that like the relational trauma can have intergenerational effects in negative ways. And how does this program potentially help break the cycles of trauma and potentially promote resilience in families?
Yeah, I think kind of really all the things that we've been talking about, this focus on strengthening mom's own well-being because she then has more resources to support and be responsive to the needs of her young one. And we know that kids who've experienced adversity, even young children, when they have that one person who is supportive and there for them, that is really, really key, that is helping them with regulation, as Sarah has talked about. Those are the things that shift the impact, right? It allows for little ones to kind of grow in their abilities to be able to, over time, build relationships that feel safe and secure with their caregivers, with other adults, with peers. It allows them to develop the ability to experience and regulate and express their feelings. And it helps with the ability to kind of explore their environment and learn. And those are the things that are kind of keys to kind of long-term mental health and well-being.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we hear a lot about resilience in how even just one caretaker can really increase the resilience in young children. So it's glad to hear that I'm hearing the same thing a little bit, but also expanding on that idea as well. So thank you so much. And I know that Mothers in Mind is not is adaptable and has been adapted in different contexts and communities. And I'm curious if you can share an example of how the program has maybe evolved to meet more diverse needs.
Yeah, so one example we'd love to share is an Indigenous-led adaptation. So CDI has had a long-standing relationship with Native Child and Family Services in Toronto. And so MIM was adapted and really led by Native Child and Family Services in this adaptation piece. And this is specific for an urban Indigenous population in Toronto. We recognize, the diversity of Indigenous communities across Canada. And central to this particular adaptation were the Ninoches, the aunties. They build a sense of comfort and safety with caregivers and children first. This culturally led approach is recognizing those distinctions among First Nations and honoring how they integrate language, teaching, songs, knowledge keepers, sacred medicines. So all these pieces are incorporated into the program, the group, the strategies that are provided, the circle time, activities, etc. And so not only is the program and materials adapted, as well as the evaluation is adapted. So using Indigenous-led research approaches where feedback is not written, It's done through storytelling, such as quilt making or conversation circles, and really allowing, that tradition of oral storytelling, oral histories to come through for mothers to share how they have experienced and enjoyed the program.
Thank you so much for diving into a good example of co-implementing with the aunties, especially at every stage of the program. I'm kind of like, what is it going to look like? Our conversations are going to look like, as well as hearing that the evaluation is also being adapted for that Indigenous lens. I think that's you don't hear that very often. So I'm really glad to hear that's how it's going about over there. So thank you so much for diving into that. And finally, as we enter our last question, what are some advice that you would give to service providers, community organizations, or maybe policymakers looking to integrate trauma-informed mother-childing program maybe into their own work?
Yeah. In thinking about this question, I really think what stands out to me is remember the importance of relationship. So I had a mentor, Dr. Angelique Jenny, who is a co-creator of the Mothers in Mind project or a program. And she would always talk about the importance of relationship. She would say, relationship, 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 to remember the way that we heal from hurtful experiences is through healthy relationships. That's the ticket. It's all about relationship. So I guess I would encourage people when you're doing this work to always have attention and focus on the relationships related to the families, within the families and outside of the families that you serve. So how am I going to develop a safe and supportive relationship with this mother and child so they feel safe enough to explore the hard parts of parenting? How am I going to support mothers in connecting with each other so they feel less alone? How am I going to support this mother and child in strengthening their relationship so this little one can feel like they can rely on this mom and this mom feels confident that they can do it? How do I build those relationships? And I think overall, how do we build relationships between agencies, across systems to better support families who've experienced trauma? In the end, it's about relationships, and that's where the good stuff is. That's where the healing and the growth happen.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for diving into that and relationship being like the main word to explain Mothers in Mind as well, that it's so important. Yeah, it seems so simple, but building long-lasting relationships with the people you work with, the people you're collaborating with, even the people that you're recruiting for your research, it's so important to have humility when conducting this work. So thank you so much. And as we enter the end of our podcast episode, is there anything that you two would like to add or we may have missed today in our discussion?
And just thank you for the opportunity for us to share and dive into this topic. It's really, really important to us. Being able to support children, youth, and families and providing them those skills so they can, thrive and really achieve those strong lifelong outcomes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on the HERHealth podcast, transforming health for women and girls at risk. Remember, your health matters, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, remember to prioritize your health and well-being. For more resources and support on issues affecting girls, women, and gender-diverse people, visit our website at avatraining.ca. This is Dr. Nicole Letourneau. Thank you for listening.